Chapter 4. Willie raced up to his bedroom, grabbed his worn-out workout shoes, pulled on a dirty hoodie that had been sitting in his hamper, then ran back downstairs, taking 3 steps at a time. Stopping only long enough to fish around in the front hall closet for a hat, he ran out into the stale, freezing night in search of his wayward pooch. It didn't take long to find Sparky's tracks. They started on the wrong side of the fence, the side that only occasionally he'd seen as a free dog. And from there, they took off in sets of 2. They indicated a dog that was running at top speed up the street and into the night. Luckily for Palmer, the dog had chosen a more or less straight route across lawn after neighbor's lawn. He only had a passing acquaintance with most of the neighbors, as fame had kept him more secluded than a normal member of his neighborhood. He wondered what the people up and down his block would think of him if they happened to peek out their window and saw him trotting along, bent over, staring at the ground. "He's gone mad!" Or maybe, "The stress of managing such losers has finally gotten to him." However, only one neighbor knew of his antics that late evening, and his only thoughts were, "It's about time." Chapter 5. Miles away, in his large Boston Edison mansion, Mike Fidrich didn't really mind winter. Sure, there was no baseball, but there was hockey. Fidrich liked nothing more than watching his Detroit sports teams from his executive suites high above the Red Wheels ice, or from up high, behind, and slightly to the right of home plate at Rosa Park. Well, that isn't entirely true. He liked money just as much. Back in the 1950s, Fidrich was a young businessman when Detroit's population was at its peak. Almost 2 million people lived within the city. Several 100,000 more lived in the cities within the city, Hamtramck and Highland Park, where the auto industry was born. Starting your business during those days was like photographing fish in a barrel. Shooting fish in a barrel. You could just lease some space in practically any part of the city, put up a sign, and investors would be there ready to hand you their money. Even if you had the wacky idea of serving a specialized Italian food that not many people had heard of. Pizza wasn't on every harried parent's suppertime mind back then, nor was it even close to showing up in college dorms. Stoners munching on a large pepperoni and cheese? Still a decade away at least. But days after opening his first joint, the word had a different connotation back then, he realized he was truly onto something. With just word-of-mouth advertising, Detroiters from all backgrounds showed up at his shop. Even though it wasn't as popular at first with Italian immigrants who tended to plug their noses at the Americanized recipe that Fidrich featured, Polish Americans, Greek Americans, Chaldean Americans, Arab Americans, Irish Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and just plain old Caucasian Americans all found themselves driving to his shop and ordering the nifty new treat. Not many people remember it these days, but back then, Fidrich was quite a ball player himself. He even spent some time in the Detroit Bengals organization. His success as a pizza purveyor put his playing days in the rearview mirror, but boy, did he love the game. Rumor has it that one evening, not too long after his shop opened, he and his wife went to the old Bengals stadium to see a game. The usher at the player's entrance remembered him and let him in the back way. The husband and wife literally bumped into a rookie right fielder named The Battery. The player asked them if they were the ones bringing the food, and without missing a beat, Mike's wife replied, "Yes, but we were told to ask you all what kind of toppings you wanted." Within minutes, they'd forgotten the ball game and were hustling back to their shop to throw together 10 large pizza treats, as they were called back then. The rest, as they say, is her story. Mike's wife took over the business of promoting their pies, while he took over the practice of selling his stores to other buyers around the city. As long as they agreed to do things the way the Fidriches did, well, and pay a healthy sum, the new owners could buy into the craze. As the city's population busted due to scurrilous practices by realtors, highways being built that connected the suburbs, and factories moving elsewhere, their pizza empire had to get creative. But they survived, thrived, and eventually became a worldwide force. Fidrich outright purchased the old team he used to play for. And, for good measure, he bought the local hockey team, too. Whenever he wasn't making scads of money, he could be found watching his players like a benevolent overlord, looking down on his minions. Championships started coming to his hockey team. Not so much with his beloved baseball. Chapter 6. Sparky's tracks were easy to follow for Willie Palmer. After 9 houses, they veered sharply to the right and up a driveway. A full moon lit the dog's progress. Willie turned too and hurried up the driveway, vaguely remembering something about it, but not quite recalling what he was recalling. As he ran toward the house that the dog had chosen, he saw a light coming from the backyard. Turning the corner, he noticed that the light was emanating from 2 larger-than-normal basement windows, which had daylight egress holes dug out around them. There, in the orange-yellow glow cast upon the snow, was Sparky, sitting and wagging his tail, looking into the basement. "Sparky! Yo, Spark!" he called out in a yelled whisper. "Sparky, get your doggy butt over here now!" The dog had no intention of moving. In truth, the run was a longer one than he had had all season, and sitting in the snow felt good on his sweaty rump. He felt a familiar little tickle, and then a small trickle escape from his bladder. Yep, he was fine for the time being, just sitting here and watching that man in the basement. He knew something deep in his canine brain about the guy, but what was it? He just couldn't put it together. Besides, it felt so sweet sitting in the snow and peeing that maybe, if he was lucky, he might find something else popping out the other end soon. Yep, thought Sparky, it does not get any better than this. Having no luck rousting his dog, Willie Palmer made the decision that changed his career, and in fact, his life. He took the few remaining steps into his neighbor's backyard and walked up to his dog. Chapter 7. The glow from the basement was bright enough to illuminate several feet of the night surrounding each large window. The first window's light held nothing in its spillover, except for a few feet of decaying snow and a clump of withered leaves that just wouldn't let go of the bush they had so happily clung to all spring, summer, and fall. The second half sphere of light, which lazily escaped from the basement, held much more. First, there was the cement garden gnome, which stood like a frozen guardian of the crusty snow and bush, as if there were any need to guard a suburban Detroit backyard bush. Next, there was an overturned, tattered deck chair, which had seen too many outdoor winters instead of being properly stored in the garage. The basement light also caught a curious canine in its glow, as it breathed heavy clouds of dog breath and slowly started fogging up the window, even though the dugout hole separated pain from pooch. And finally, the warm light shining out into the night found the manager of 2003's worst baseball team now on his hands and knees in the numbing snow staring, for just the briefest of moments, into his neighbor's basement. But even though it was only for a very quick second, the manager was spied by the owner of the house, and when their eyes met, Palmer knew he was busted. Chapter 8. There are times in our lives when we fall into the most amazingly awkward situations. We wonder how in the heck we get caught, as they used to say in the 1970s, with our pants down. There are embarrassing moments that we wish we could take back, like asking a woman when her baby is due and finding out she's not really pregnant, just a bit overweight. Each of these times serve to remind us that the universal forces in life are not only all-seeing and all-knowing, but they have really good senses of humor too. Most of the holy books in the major religions don't publicize their God's emphatic desire for us to laugh at ourselves, but no faith would be complete without a really hearty guffaw about our fallibility. Willie Palmer knew too well, or so he thought, that he was fallible. Losing almost 120 games in one season told him this readily. So why would the universe want to play another little prank on him and allow a neighbor to see him down on all fours, watching said neighbor do his evening workout, shirtless on a basement elliptical? Why would anyone put Willie through any more humiliation and embarrassment? Why did the neighbor just wave at him and keep on ellipticizing? And why, in God's name, was Sparky starting to barky? Chapter 9. Barely regaining his composure, if that was at all possible under the circumstances, Willie jumped up and grabbed his now yapping dog and started to drag him away from the window. When Sparky dug in his heels and ducked down, Willie was too much off balance and too flustered to remember the cement gnome. Love them or hate them, the garden guardian fulfilled his duty, and just as the manager had hoped to make a dirty getaway, the gnome kept his ground and tripped the intruder. Out at second, there was no arguing with the ump, or imp. Back down into the snow fell Palmer. Back to the window flew Sparky, and wobbling back into position, the gnome went. The only one not in position was the elliptician, who was curiously absent from the tableau.